Hi all, welcome to part 2 of the intro lecture. There you can see my name. If you've been looking at it wondering a little bit, how do you say this guy's name? It's a little bit of a hokey phonetic attempt, and Tony Skoltz. There's my email. You'll see the note in Blackboard Learn about my preference for you using the UIT email. Whoever designed the Blackboard Learn, whatever it is, messaging system, sort of email equivalent. My theory is they've never actually used email before, maybe never even used the internet. It doesn't track, send messages. It doesn't send notifications if an email goes in. So if you contact me, you're at the mercy of how often I check Blackboard Learn, which is quite regularly, but this is an easier way to go. You will always reach me, right? If you email me at UIT account, it bings on my phone and bings on my computer, and you've reached me very quickly. So yeah, I prefer that. And so today I want to talk about two key things relatively briefly. First, I want to go over the major themes of the course, and then I want to look at the course requirements and some of the content that we will cover. The textbook, again, this is in the syllabus. I'm sure most of you have it. You should get rolling. I've got the readings outlined at the end. We deal with the book in a fairly linear way, and it's as good a book as any technical communication book I've come across. Now, obviously, we have supplements, and as I mentioned in part 1, I have all sorts of example documents and variations on what's in the text. And the text has some really good examples, and in places it's a bit thin, and in particular, those areas I try to beef up a little bit. The Northing-Jawinski book is recommended. It's a great resource. You'll have it for a long time, past your academic career. So, the dry version. What is technical communication? Well, it's instructions, it's explanation, the why, problem solving, and embedded in there is problem identification. So the communication piece is a representation of your expertise, and it's your credibility as a professional. So your research, your writing, and your design, all of that reflects on your professionalism. It's not poetry, right? As I mentioned in part 1, it is depersonalized and is oriented to the needs of the reader in a very specific way, in a very strong way. It's not introspective. Now, that because the writing is depersonalized doesn't mean that the writing is uninteresting or boring, or that it doesn't evoke emotions in the reader. You're presenting a problem, and if your reader connects with the problem, you've got them. And if you can show them that you understand the full breadth of the problem and the potential options to solve the problem, they're with you, right? You're spurring their imagination. It's not a fiction book, but or a feature magazine article, right? Your voice, your character, your personality isn't coming through. All you're doing is taking what the reader needs to fix and helping them solve it. And in that way, you are achieving your goal and their goal. So there are a few, speaking of goals, learning goals, we will spend quite a bit of time talking about purpose and audience, about research skills. I've got some tricks around Google Scholar and some other tools, and then some principles we talk about. There's that analysis of sources and the synthesis of them together. How do we weave, you find 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 really great sources. How do you weave them together in a way that's effective? We will look at structure rhetorical strategies. We will look at sort of at the sentence level and the paragraph level, writing for clarity, and then also referencing to ensure that you've done all this great research, that you don't have a problem, be accused of plagiarism. So that's sort of the dry side of it. It becomes, for me, a little bit more manageable when I start to group things under themes, and hopefully for you too. So one key theme is noise, another is making decisions, another is honesty, and another is uncertainty. So 4 key themes. Let me deal with each of them in turn. When you have noise, and I use that, it's a communication term often associated with radio and other sorts of mediums like that. But for me, noise is anything that distracts the reader, and it's particularly aggravating when somebody reads and there's typos, or there's an incorrect word is chosen, or fonts change. This is noise. It's also noise when you don't make any decisions, when you just include material, right? You find all this great research and you think, well, I found it, I did it, but I'm not gonna start. I did all that work. I'm going to show that I did that work, right? That's a very, I don't want to say narcissistic, but a self-interested sort of approach. It doesn't matter what you did. It's what your audience needs. What does your reader need? And contemporary organizations, whether they're web-based, whether they're manufacturers, technology is becoming so complex that many other experts in your organization don't necessarily understand it. And your ability to convey complexity in a clear way to consumers and reviewers is crucial. So the idea of becoming a knowledge translator, not just a disseminator, but somebody who takes complex ideas and clarifies them. You make decisions about what's important from all that technical complexity. What does the reader need to know? Those are the important decisions, and that's where your expertise, your engineering, or whatever field you're coming from, that's where that technical knowledge is so valuable. So, in general, the better writer you become, the better our society becomes, right? In a society that is becoming so technically sophisticated, you being a knowledge translator is vital for people who don't hold the same sort of knowledge as you, and you become a service provider, and an important one, right? It sounds maybe a little bit of a hyperbole, but around a functioning democracy, but it's true. When societies become too disconnected, when there's a knowledge elite and the rest of the people can't understand what's going on, that's not the sort of society I think that we want in Canada. We want people to be knowledgeable, and so we will talk. We have a couple exercises around that. Successful technical communication. It's strong writing, right? You need to think about organization. You need to think about saying it in as efficient, concise way as you can. You need to think about your reader's knowledge. Don't assume what they know. We'll look at this in more depth. We're going to talk about design. We're going to talk about, this is something that really gets me going, is all the jargon and the acronyms. We're going to talk about strategies to reduce that, increase readability, increase credibility, and avoid ambiguous and unclear sentences. So just to start us off on sort of a lighter note, in terms of ambiguous and unclear sentences, it's not just first year engineering students. It afflicts journalists, policymakers, media personalities, right? I picked out a couple headlines that made me laugh. Panda mating fails. veterinarian takes over. That is one committed veterinarian. Yikes. Local high school dropouts cut in half. Again, right? That's a school where I'm pretty sure people were studying a lot. Or they could just mean that the number of dropouts decreased. So we will talk about why ambiguity comes in, about how to locate modifying information, right? Riveting stuff. It's important. I'm being a little bit sarcastic, but it's important. Modified information can be more confusing, right? The room contained a chair, a desk, and a chocolate bar. It was 26 feet long by 17 feet wide. The modified information, well, it sounds like it's talking about a chocolate bar, and an amazingly big chocolate bar at that. We know it's not, right? We know that they're talking about the room, but it's funny, and you don't want your readers laughing. You could change these words in this sentence, right, to some sort of technical analysis around a sewage plant, and we could make it pretty funny too, I'm sure. You don't want your audience distracted. You want them to pay attention to your core message. Don't kill your reader. Right? When removing the rods, one can't remove them too quickly. Right? Think about the alarms are going off. You open the manual. You work at a nuclear plant. When removing the rods, one can't remove them too quickly. Does that mean that you can't remove them quickly enough, so that's fast? Or one can't remove them too quickly, like you don't want to pull them out too fast? Which is it, right? And that's well, we'll let our imaginations go with that. Honesty and uncertainty is another, or two of the final key themes that I've combined them here, but we deal with them separately and in a sustained way. We talk quite a bit about plagiarism, and most plagiarism happens inadvertently or because somebody doesn't know how to make what they're looking at different, right? So they end up basically writing it the same way and not putting in quotation marks. Honesty is recognizing that you may have you find your problem around getting astronauts to Mars, and you think you've got a solution, and then you start researching, and you find that your idea is not that good, or it's been tried, or there's a much better solution out there. Do you avoid it? Do you not look at that piece of information, stick with your idea, or do you recognize, right? Do you look critically at yourself and try to improve your idea, or even potentially, right? You've got a whole bunch of options. You end up picking an option that you didn't think was a good one, and that's honesty. When we recognize that our ideas have to change, and we don't just go looking for things that confirm what we already think. That's that confirmation bias. We'll talk about fallacies in the course. And dealing with uncertainty, I put at the bottom here, thinking inside the gray box. And there's the cliche that's just been beaten, right? It's been overused so badly, thinking outside the box. Oh, that person thinks outside the box. Now I think it's blue sky thinking, and I'm sure there's a few cliches that have popped up. But usually when people say, oh, so-and-so is thinking outside the box, well, usually that person is still thinking inside the box. They're just thinking in new ways. They're thinking about uncertainty. They're recognizing new combinations. And so don't feel in your project that you need to strike out in some incredibly new direction. You can look at an old problem or an existing problem and think if there's a better way to solve it. And I've got some examples of topics that I'll show you in just a second. Here we have the course requirements. You can see it's a fairly simple distribution, writing activities, tutorial participation. You've got your proposal and your formal analytical report. And then weekly reading quizzes. We used to do a midterm and a final. Um, this has seemed to work better. People have gotten better grades on the quizzes, going with weekly reading quizzes that are due before you start tutorials. So each cycle, right? So that you will finish a reading quiz before the content is covered in lecture and in tutorials. So each piece here is explained thoroughly through Blackboard Learn, and in talking about each one today in this lecture. But then also I have further instructions and other videos later on in the semester. The content of the major assignment: pick any sort of a technology or what I call a socio-technical process. Does it advance you professionally? Is it just something you're interested in? Whatever, but it's got to be something that you're engaged with. And so what you do is you take your problem, and it might be based in a real organization, but what we ask you to do is create a scenario whereby there's this problem that could benefit from some sort of attention, some sort of solution, and we ask you to look for options, right? Not just one solution, but an analytical report, right? It has a problem statement, has background, has a list of usually 3 options, and then your recommendations. And so it's going to be a document that is used by senior decision makers in your organization. You can be in the public sector, you can be in the private sector. It doesn't matter what industry you're in. It's totally up to you. Let me give you some examples to help you envision what this project might look like. It can be big and small, big or small, can be serious, can be lighthearted. I've given a bunch of examples that are probably more on the serious side. Maybe a fleet of electric cars or buses for Oshawa. Maybe you're looking at standardizing software across your company. Maybe solid waste disposal issues, food safety, pandemic management. I put zombies, you see, with a question mark, because, hey, if you want to do a pandemic management analysis for zombies, that's okay. There are legitimate academic papers out that have used zombies as a method for advancing pandemic prevention strategies. It's all good as long as the research is good, the writing is good, the analysis is good. You can have a little bit of fun with it. You could look at electronic books replacing hard copies. My example that I've used a few times here: Trip to Mars, biosolids, which kind of grosses me out, but hey, maybe that's the answer for some company seeking to, maybe it's a waste company, maybe it's a farming company. You could do an analysis. You could, if you're more interested in sort of social issues, there's methadone clinics you could look at, self-driving cars. Junk food in schools is a fairly current issue. Open source, carbon sequestration, injection pods for space shuttles, drones in healthcare, right? I know Amazon is trying to use them. Maybe there's ways to use them in the excuse me, the developing world. New safety features for NASCAR, tsunami warning systems. That comes to my mind because I'm on the West Coast. Whatever. I say this with great care. I don't care. We don't care what you pick. As long as you're engaged, as long as it's technical enough that you can write a full analytical report around it, that's all that matters. So start thinking now. We do the first writing assignment, the in-lecture activity, or what I call the writing activity, is around ideas for the project. throw them out, get your brain going about it. Getting back to plagiarism, right? So what you're allowed to do in this course is study anything that you're interested in. What you are not allowed to do is to use other people's work as your own. And there's a real enticement there where when people are under stress, right? It's the night before and they haven't got much material, and then they start pulling material off the internet and slamming it in and trying to pass it off as their own. Don't do it. Don't do it. Take a couple days of late penalty. It's not worth it, because we've been doing this a while. We're pretty good at it, right? We spot lifted text pretty easily. We use turnitin.com. You just need to put it in your own words and cite your sources. We're impressed if your document's filled with sources. You've done a lot of research, great. But when I say that, I should note that it's not quantity over quality. It's whatever is appropriate, right? So you might have 10 sources. You might have 30. It's whatever is appropriate to supporting your analysis. You'll have 3 writing activities to do over the semester. And what we've tried to do is link them closely to the proposal and major project, right? So that they're not diversions, they're actually supportive, and through the semester, instead of you just having a proposal and forgetting about your project until the end of the semester and then coming back and doing your analytical report, these writing activities both help you get going with your proposal, help you find a partner, and support you as you develop the formal analytical report. So you've got a problem statement that comes in, and that's written on your own, right, previous to finding a partner, and you post it in the discussion board that's linked to your tutorial, but that everybody can see. So you get in there, you post your problem statement, and you look around and try to find people who are interested in the same thing as you. You may not, maybe you find somebody who's interested and you end up doing your full project related to the problem you've identified. Maybe you change your focus a little bit and do something that another person is interested in. It'll be a process of compromise and negotiation, but that is one tool we use to get you started and get you figuring out what are you interested in, and connecting to others who are interested in similar things. The second writing activity comes in after the proposal and is an outline of your project, and the third one, just before the full formal analytical report is due, is an executive summary, right, which is one of the key things in your document that builds your credibility with senior level people in your organization. They will often read that first, and sometimes only that. So each of these pieces is, again, it isn't a diversion. It's our way to help you have a bunch of the work done. We know that you guys are, all of you are busy, and so we want you to engage in lots of writing. It's a writing course primarily, but not to overload you. We will talk more. I'll have bits on each of the writing activities, and there are instructions in Blackboard Learn. There will be further instructions, and I'll talk about it in videos that I release. In general, right now, the key part is remembering that, I'll talk about this in a sec, but there's no bell curve in this course. So the writing activities and the feedback that you offer is, helping somebody else doesn't threaten your mark. We're trying to build a community, a supportive community of students, lots of peer feedback, and get you thinking about how to provide feedback, how to provide constructive feedback, right? Telling people, great work, I love it, love your project idea, right? That's not helpful. It's positive, but it's not helpful. So the goal is to advance other people's projects, give them ideas, critique their work, but do it in a constructive way, right? Don't be cruel. The weekly reading quizzes, they will be advertised well in advance. You can write them wherever you want. The quizzes are open book, so I make the note here that they're challenging but no trick questions. You'll get 45 minutes to answer 10 questions, and I think that is ample. We used to, as I talked about earlier, do a midterm and a final, but the goal is to have you read the material before watching the videos, and especially before going to tutorials, the corresponding tutorial where you're going to cover the information in the text. So this seems to have worked well, and so just keep an eye out. I will always send an announcement with links to where you go to write the quiz, what the quiz covers. There are some technical issues, really mostly just around bandwidth. Is your connection stable enough to write the quiz? So again, you'll see material flow out about that. The tutorials are a really important time for you to get to know your TA, right? This course is designed to mimic, in some ways, a professional writing environment. Your TA for your major projects, right? In your scenario, your TA is your supervisor. They are the one marking your proposal and your writing activities and your formal analytical report. I spot check, I consult, I'm involved, but they are at the center of the marking. So we work together to make sure that marking is similar, right? And that we all use the same rubric, which will be available to you. But each TA is their own unique individual. They will have slightly different expectations. They will give you slightly different instructions. And so it is very important that you go to tutorial, you get to know them, right? It's not that you write exactly for them, but in a professional environment, your supervisor, your CEO, your CFO, whoever, that is often your key audience, right? That is who you are writing for. So you are, in a sense, writing for your TA. Your TAs come from various backgrounds. They are invaluable. They've done lots of writing themselves. They've done lots of teaching of writing. I'm really happy with who we're working with this semester, and you will get a chance to meet your TA at your first tutorial. So I'll let them introduce themselves. But in general, you have to go. It's not just about being there, right? But it's actually about participating. So take the time to have read the material. You should have done the quiz before your tutorial. Take in questions, right? It's a time for you, right, to access your TA and clarify instructions, to ask for guidance, to work out if you're struggling with a project idea. I'm always available via email, and I have the drop-in times. I'm happy to consult as well. If you're sending out emails, unless it's something extremely specific, always include your TA and me. Even if you're writing just to your TA, CC me. If you're writing to me, relates to the course, CC your TA, right? Just keep the both of us in the loop. Okay? So, core message, go to tutorial. A few other things. There's no bell curve. So we do a lot of collaboration in the course. We do a lot of peer review. And And so we hope it's a non-competitive sort of process, right? You're not worried that if you help somebody, they're going to get boost their grade and your grade's going to go down because there's a curve. You get what you get. And so in that spirit, we hope everybody gets in there and mixes it up. And we ask you to do some peer editing. And I talk, I mentioned in part one that I've done some professional editing, and I really enjoy it. And my hope is that you embrace that as well. You look at yourself as a professional editor and really try to improve those other people's writing and their documents. This sort of shouldn't even really need to be said, right? Treat everybody with respect, and treat the communication here as practice for your working life. So don't just blast off an email. Draft it, think about it, reflect it. If you're concerned, have a peer look at it. Particularly if it's an issue that you're unhappy about and you want to affect some change, right? I'm sure most people here have seen an email that was written in haste and in anger, and usually doesn't benefit the person writing it, and it usually doesn't solve the problem. So work on your, not just this formal document that we work on, but your interpersonal communication. The library, I will outline some resources that are there for you in a later video, but if you're close, go check it out. Walk around. The librarians are great. They're paid to help people. They if you walk up and ask them, they will want to help you, and your success can be helped by them, by the resources. They know stuff that I don't know. The TAs don't know. They're experts on their field. If you're struggling with your writing, we can provide some feedback on grammar and writing mechanics. You'll get rich feedback, but you're not going to get your document marked up line word by word, comma by comma. That's going to take something else, whether it's a peer reviewer and a good one, whether it's the Academic Success Center. It's up to you. So when the TA alerts you and says, hey, look, you need to work on your writing, you've got significant problem with your writing mechanics, that's a trigger early in the semester that you need to go and seek somebody out. All right, so I'm done. I tried to keep it short. It's not that short. Hey, hint, buy the book. Right? Buy the book, buy the book, buy the book, buy the book. Get reading. You can't succeed in this course without the book, unfortunately. Between the expectation that you implement the material from the book in your analytical report, talking about content in tutorials, the quizzes, right? You can't do it. You've got to own it or share it if you trust somebody that they're going to share the book back. Please review the syllabus carefully. Look it over. I sometimes joke, that they always say there's no stupid questions, and that in fact there are when something's on the front page of the syllabus, and somebody asks you right after you've explained it to them and you've said, look, here's the information, read this, and then they ask you. That's kind of a question that didn't need to be asked. So the documents are online. I've put in screen reader friendly versions. Those are searchable. Take your time. It builds your credibility as a student and a future professional that you can search out information, find it. Having said that, if you look and you can't find anything, do not hesitate. And don't hesitate to drop in again in those Adobe Connect drop-in hours. So your job before next week is to read principles 1 through 3. It's not, pages 18 to 56. It's a pretty good read, but I think it'll orient you. It's an important part. It sets the stage for everything we do after. And the biggest one is thinking about your problem, your scenario. Start jotting things down. It can be things you're passionate about, things that make you angry, right? I use an example I'll talk about in the course is traffic in Toronto, so and urban urban infrastructure down there, and that's it. So stay tuned. I'll continue to release short videos about the proposal, the analytical report, research, and then on Mondays and earlier than I have on this now, release videos around content. And as I said, I'll try to do one thematic, and then a few shorter ones that deal with specific material. If people are advanced enough in their writing, they can move quickly through them. If you need to look at them, you can watch them again. But that allows us to deal with the diversity of abilities in the course. So finally, welcome. It's going to be a good semester if you put the time in now to get that problem clear in your head and work. Think about your scenario. And this is an intro video. I will offer some additional examples. I'll talk about what does a scenario look like? How detailed does it have to be? We'll look at that shortly in the next couple weeks. Okay, we'll talk to you next week.